Okay, we'll call a meeting to order. Can I have a mover and seconder call the meeting to order, please? Councillor Chapman, Councillor Moore. That the regular meeting of the Council of Township of Springwater of March 4, 2020 come to order at 6:30 p.m. All those in favor? Carried. Please stand for the singing of the national anthem, led by Deputy Mayor Coghlan.
O Canada, our home and native land,
True patriot love in all our sons command. With glowing hearts we see thee rise, the true north, strong and free. From far and wide, O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. God keep our land glorious and free. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
I can't help it, it's hockey season.
We missed you there.
Sorry. Someone else can teach.
Thank you for attending and tuning in, for those who are or will do in future. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest tonight, Council? Okay. Moving on to deputation and presentations, I'd like to call upon William Perry and Cindy Fulton for a delegation on development charges for secondary suites at 1712 Penetanguishene Road. Welcome. Please come forward and each take a seat, and you have to pull those mics, get close to those mics so that it catches the recording, please.
Okay. We're using the the Simcoe County affordable housing grant in order to put in or to replace an existing garage and put an affordable unit above it for a retired family member who qualifies for the affordable housing. And running through this whole process here, we'll go to the next slide here. Again, the slides aren't super fantastic. Oh, the side button. Oh, there we are. Gotcha. Okay, so when we came in here and we were doing some fact finding so we can get an idea what our budget would be, we were indicated that the septic that we had, which is older, but it was sort of indicated that it would more than likely pass to put the second unit in. And again, we weren't relying 100% on that information, but it was during our fact finding mission. We eventually found out after the fee of getting it, it wouldn't pass. So
because of the build.
Yeah, because of the extra build. So we needed to add another $30,000 to our budget. And through all those discussions with everybody here who was very helpful on the desk, they were indicating that a building permit for such a building would be around the $2,000 to $3,000 mark based on the square footage. The fact there was a garage and there was an apartment above it. That's the number that was bandied about with all the people we spoke with here. So then we actually came in, applied for the building permit. All the charges were put out. That it actually included the development charges, but I was told or indicated that the development charges are normally waived for this style of build. And then subsequently, the next day, I received an email saying, well, no, they're not going to be waived, and these are the fees that you're going to incur. So the building permit went from what we expected it to be around the $2,000 to $3,000 range, upwards of $15,800. So again, significantly stretching our budget. And so if you're looking at a similar build, we've talking to similar people in the area. The similar build is about $2,000. We've also had to go through a rezoning process, from what we understand, because the bylaws aren't down on paper. Pretty much every build of this type needs to go through council, because we were here 6 or 8 months ago to run through that, which was another $2,000 charge. So we've got the retired family member living with us, not the most ideal situation, and we're running long here. We are at risk of losing the grant money from the county, which is basically was put in our budget so that we'd be able to handle it. So when we were in the process here, I think the grant, I've got a typo on the next slide there. The Simcoe County Second Suites program is providing $30,000. So then we looked at the development fees that we were not expecting to pay, but that would be levied on it, including public separate, the county, and also Springwater, and we are in works with Springwater to have them defer these fees as well. That's a total of about $13,000 that were unexpected charges. So we're looking at, again, trying to stretch this budget in order to get this bill done, to get that affordable housing that the county is looking for, apparently desperate for. So when you take the, again, typo, sorry, the fees from the money that's coming from the county, you end up with, it says 11, it would be 16,364. So it seems like the county's handing out money in order to get these houses built, but then we're chewing up more than half of it in the development fees that are going to be related with it. It seems to be a little counterproductive.
And what we've looked into is Bill 108, which is the Affordable Housing Free, I have to put my glasses on, More Homes, More Choice Act, which actually was passed in June 6th of last year. And from what we've read and looked into, it will waive all these development charges once it's to be active. And it's actually supposed to be active as of January this year. And all municipalities are supposed to be following kind of that new enactment as of January 21st. But on paper, it says January 2020 to waive any of those affordable housing. So the affordable housing, seniors spend about 70% of their income on rent in Simcoe County. My sister actually presently gets $734 a month for a pension, and anything comparable for her to live in would be about $13.30 a month. That's the cheap end. And that's actually, Springwater right now is actually more expensive than Barrie.
So if you look at 108 and you look at a couple of the wordings there, it's their proposed regulations, the amends that, so units can be created with ancillary structures over the garage without triggering development charges. So again, it seems that, you know, the spirit of this legislation that is, I'm not exactly sure if it's actually enacted or if it's already been through its third reading.
It's passed.
And
It's
again,
law.
not a lawyer, not a politician, so I did my best to root this out. It looks like the intent of that is to avoid the development charges while people are trying to provide affordable housing. And if you look at all the development charges, it's sort of counteracting what the county's trying to do to get these locations built. So we're looking to see if we can have those development charges waived so that the budget doesn't need to be extended again by another, which turns out to be about $15,000. So that's why we're here.
Okay, thank you. So before we go to questions of council members here, I'd like to turn it to Director Corbeil to talk about the development charge aspect and Director Spagnell to talk about the planning aspect. So Director Corbeil.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll just address some of the information that was just presented. And the section of Bill 108 that's being referred to is not in legislation. There were several pieces within it, and it's not for affordable housing types. There's no exemption for that specifically. What this situation is under is a secondary unit within an ancillary building, which is the garage, and that again is not in effect yet. And the draft legislation was released last June. Some pieces of it came into effect January 1st, but that was the freezing of rates and deferral of rates for certain types of housing, nonprofit, institutional. And then last Friday, further to that, there was draft regulations released about the soft services of development charges as well as the community benefit charges. But again, the secondary suites not within the home has not been put into legislation, and this exemption's not in our bylaw either. So that's why the development charges are being requested.
Okay, Director Spagnell.
Thank you, Marilyn. Just on top of that, I'd like to add that currently the municipality is going through its official plan review process where the municipality will be looking at secondary suites and adding for permissions to allow for second suites and detached buildings, which is what is being contemplated here and what the presenters would like to do. I just would like to inform council that there was a previous request related to another second unit that came to council on December 18th. at that point where the requesters were asking for waiving of development charges. And it was at that council meeting where council had decided not to exempt from the development charges that were being requested as per the existing bylaw. There was a consideration of an agreement as part of that request that flowed through council and part of council's consideration, which would essentially defer the payment of the development charges. I believe it was for, I think, approximately 1 year. And if after that point there that Bill 108 had not come into effect, then essentially those development charges would be required and paid. But it was all contingent on the finalization of Bill 108 and that coming into force. From the development charge perspective, really, I think from the municipality standpoint, there's a number of development charges that are listed through the delegation. And really, the only development charge that this municipality can deal with is the spring water specific development charges. So I just wanted to make that clear. But I just thought it'd be necessary to provide that information for council's consideration.
Director Corbeil?
Thank you. And further to that, if council were to waive the spring water portion, it must come up with a way to fund that otherwise, because the payment has to go into the development charges reserve fund. So it would have to come out of taxation or some other piece. So you can't just waive it, but you have to find a funding source if you were to do that.
Okay, thank you. I'll open it up to council comments, questions. Councillor Cabral?
Thank you, Mayor Allen. I was thinking back to December when a similar request came forward, and there was discussion regarding it, and the legislation was not in place at the time. It's still not in place at the time. And now, from hearing from our treasurer, it seems that if we were to do anything, then we would have to still come up with the money ourselves, which would basically mean that we would be subsidizing the DC charges from other taxation, I guess. So
We're actually quite willing to even consider the fact that these development charges be not waived, but maybe put on hold, because it was very clear that if this bill passes, and we've spoken to people at this municipality, that if it passes tomorrow and we paid the bill today, we would still have to pay, we would not get any refund. So we would be more than happy with the fact that if this was waived, say till June of 21, that would cover the January 2021 that the ministry wants this enacted by, so that we are able to get our money back if this actually falls through.
Director Spagno, what were the mechanics of that element of the agreement that you referred to, please?
Thank you, Mayor Allen. The mechanics were that there would have to be, my understanding is a $10,000 security posted as well, that the municipality would hold on to.
As well as what?
It would be posted as part of that agreement, with the thought being that those could be drawn upon from a development charge perspective if they are required later on down the roads.
Okay.
So the idea was that the deferral could get that particular applicant off the ground and running, or on the ground running, and to go and build their unit without having the extra expense for the development charges. But the idea that if the development charges were required, that they would have to be paid through the mechanism of that agreement.
Okay. Just pausing for a second. I need a mover and seconder to get this on the floor. Councillor Moore, Councillor Chapman. Other comments, questions? Just there's none down here. Okay, Councillor Cabral.
I'm still not certain whether a deferral would work. I would have concerns that the legislation I don't see if there's anything in the legislation that permits this to be retroactive, to permit the DC charges to be waived at a later date. The legislation's not currently in effect, and that's unfortunately what's causing the problem. And I think at the last one, the suggestion was they could wait to build and see what happens, or they could build now. It was kind of like left up to the individual's choice. But having heard what the treasurers said, I don't know how that would work now if the DC charges still have to be paid down the road if they are waived. Do they not where's that money gonna come from? Is it gonna come from the DC fund to be pulled back out again once we've already had to put it in there due to the legislation? I don't know how that mechanic would work. How do you say, we gotta take it, and then later on, say, well, now we can give it back to you? I don't see how that works.
Director Corbeil?
You're correct, it doesn't really work.
Okay. Any other comments or questions? Okay, the motion is that the delegation from William Perry and Cindy Fulton regarding the request to remove development charges for secondary suites be received. So we're receiving this. There's no conclusion with respect to this, but we've heard the discussion. Unless somebody would like to amend it, then I think we should just receive it and leave it up to planning and finance to get back to them. Okay? All those in favor? Carried. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, next, we have a delegation with respect to the mixed subdivision from Matthew Corey, from Malone Given Parsons Limited, and I see we have Ms. Cheryl Schindrick from Geranium. Welcome, both of you.
Thank you, Your Worship. I am Cheryl Schindrick, for those of you who don't know me, with Geranium Corporation, and this is Matthew Corey of Malone Given Parsons. We are here today simply to say we're here in connection with report number RR 2019-004, item 8.9 on your agenda, and we're here to speak in support of the staff report that is before you. And I think it does a very good job of outlining the nature of the changes and the reasons for them, and they're fairly straightforward. We're here if there are any questions of council of us in advance of considering the item.
Okay, thank you. We've read the report. Are there any questions you wanted to pose of the delegators at this point in time? Let's first start by getting this delegation on the table. Deputy Mayor Coughlin and Councillor Moore. Any questions or comments with respect? Otherwise, we'll receive this and then get into it further once we get to that report. Councillor Cabral?
Thank you, Mayor Allen. The only question I had with respect to it was, I guess the wastewater or the water storage facility was going to be reduced in size?
The stormwater management facility?
Yes, and I was wondering what the percentage of that might be. How large a percentage is it being reduced? I know that the engineers' report seemed to indicate that that was certainly doable, but I'm just playing devil's advocate here, and you know, we get snowstorms that we certainly don't anticipate coming and doing things, and we could also have situations where we get a lot of rainwater. I just wanted to know what the percentage of reduction would be, if you might happen to, even if it's a ballpark.
I'm not sure that I have that figure with us today, Councillor, through you, Mr. Mayor. It has been vetted with the engineers, your engineers and our engineers. And so I'm sure I could get you that information, but I don't have it here.
Yeah, I was just curious whether it was 50%, you know, maybe 15%, you know.
Mr. Director Spagnol is indicating he's got a comment here, so
Okay.
go ahead.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Allen, through to Councillor Cabral. Taking a look at the chart, we're looking at a reduction of approximately half a hectare. So we're going from 3.6 hectares to 2.93 hectares. So it's about half a hectare.
Through you, Mr. Chair, or through you, Your Worship, it's about 18%.
Thank you.
That's good. Okay, well, thank you for the delegation, and we'll be getting to the report
Thank you. Thank you very much.
a little later on. Thank you. So I have a mover and a seconder that the delegation from Matthew Corey from Malone Given Parsons Limited and Ms. Schindrick regarding the request to approve the red line revisions for this mixed subdivision be received. All those in favor? Carried. And our third delegation is with respect to Primacare Living Solutions, Inc., development of a seniors campus. Mr. Matthew Melchior and Melchior, is it Melchior or Melchior?
Melchior, sir.
Melchior, sorry. And Jill Knowlton from Primacare Living Solutions presenting to us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, and good evening. We're from a company. Our company is called Primacare, and we currently operate long-term care homes in Ontario, and also manage third-party managed long-term care homes that are struggling under mandatory management orders. The province appoints us as managers to assist those homes to become compliant in their operations. There's a tremendous opportunity right now in Ontario. In fact, this is the second time I've seen this in my 38-year career, and I'm surprised at that, that we're going to see new long-term care beds built. And the province has announced 15,000 new beds to be developed and 15,000 old beds to be redeveloped. And we're here tonight to talk about the 15,000 new beds to be developed in Ontario, and we are proposing a campus of care facility, which would be anchored by a 192-bed long-term care home in Springwater as part of that new allocation from the province. Just see how I advance the slides here. How do I do that?
Sorry, we're doing the wrong thing.
Sorry.
Apologize.
Oh, thank you. Okay, I'll just, a little bit about our company then. So as I mentioned, we own 3 long-term care homes, and we manage an additional 3 homes. Again, homes that the province asks us to step in and assist with issues that they may have. We have a current phase 1 allocation for a new long-term care development in Waterdown in the Hamilton area, and that was part of, again, the first 5,000 beds. And in our company, we have over 30 years of experience in operating long-term care homes. We have a very innovative design and care model that I'd like to spend a little bit of time tonight talking to you about, and it's called the Butterfly Model of Care. It's for dementia care, and it's really the future forward way for long-term care. We also have been very fortunate to have a very large research grant from the Center for Aging and Brain Health Innovation at Baycrest, using virtual reality as a therapy in residents with moderate to severe dementia. And again, we've got 3 of our homes in the Best Practice Spotlight Award 3-year project right now, and we have a 95% satisfaction rating amongst our across all our homes. And I'm not doing this right. Yep. So if we look at demand for Springwater area, right now today, this area needs 600 long-term care beds. There are currently 35,000 residents today on a wait list for a long-term care bed in Ontario. So it is at a crisis level, and it's not getting any better. That number just continues to creep upwards. 14% of the population in this area is age 75 years plus, and that's a really important number for us because that's the number we use to measure the number of long-term care beds that are needed in a particular area or region. The average wait list in this area for a basic bed, so a basic bed is a room that you would share, not a private room, but a shared room, is 7 years. And I can tell you in my experience, when it's a 7-year wait list for a bed, you never come into the home. You do not make it to the home. There's over 1,000 people currently on the wait list for 10 homes in this sub-region. And this area, so we call it the North Simcoe Muskoka region, or LIN, has one of the highest ALC, alternate level of care, rates in the entire province. It's greater than 20%, and currently there's 227 patients sitting in an ALC bed. 101 of those patients are at the Royal Vic Hospital, so you can imagine 101 people are waiting for placement. They're in a hospital bed. That hospital bed should be used for people in the community that need a hospital bed. This is what contributes to hallway healthcare. I'm sure you've heard that term. This is what contributes to it. Those 101 people, 227 altogether, should be in a long-term care home. Medium wait time for long-term care admission from the hospital is 220 days. So those folks sitting in those ALC beds are there at the median is 220 days. And 70% crisis admission rate. And again, why is that number important? Because crisis admissions take priority over somebody who's waiting in the community, and those people will go into a bed before somebody who's maybe waiting 2-3 years in the community for a bed. So that's a very significant number. And the other piece that is a big contributing factor here is that because of this demand and because of a capacity problem, a lack of capacity, residents in this area must travel outside of their community for access to a long-term care bed. That is not uncommon. We hear about people having to go to Thunder Bay, we hear about people having to go to London, and it can take a very long period of time before they can be repatriated to their home community. Puts a lot of stress on that individual who is away from their family, away from their home, and also on their family and their loved ones who are separated, because there just is this huge lack of capacity in long-term care. So our proposal, and again, a tremendous opportunity right now with the 15,000 new beds, is to build a 192-bed long-term care home as part of a campus of care. The long-term care home anchors a campus of care. A campus of care has other elements. It includes a seniors hub, or what we call a health hub, and it includes other seniors housing. The other seniors housing can be everything from independent seniors apartments right through to assisted living. And really in the other seniors housing, we can very safely accommodate and maintain people from end to end, right through to palliative care and to end of life. And I always, when I speak with the ministry, I often say to them, the number we really should be reporting on is not the number of people who are waiting, the 35,000 on the wait list, but the number that we are able to successfully keep out of long-term care. Because really people want to age in place, people want to age in their own homes, in their own communities, but they need those long-term care level supports. So that's what a campus provides, that we harness the strength of the services that are available on the campus through that long-term care home. The health hub or the seniors hub will provide adult day services. In our new development in Waterdown, for example, that adult day service program is going to run 24 hours a day. So for families who need relief over the nighttime period, or perhaps people are work in the nighttime, there will be a place for their loved one to go. Adult day services can provide long-term care level services. And then that individual goes back home to their home and back home to their family. So it serves the community that way as well. And then the services as well can be provided to those folks who are living in the other seniors housing, in the apartments. And people want to stay in their own homes, and they can successfully live in their own homes, right? I often, I say end to end. A campus also has lots of opportunity for community space and for programs, for clinic space for the hospital. We're talking with the Royal Vic Hospital right now. They are providing a letter of support for this project. They're very interested in some of that hub space to use for some of their outpatient clinics. Again, if I just reference our Waterdown project, we're doing outpatient dialysis. Again, relieving the pressure on the hospital, moving it out to a clinic site, and successfully being able to manage people outside of a hospital where we've got this massive issue with capacity in hallway healthcare. The community space is a wonderful opportunity for local seniors to stay connected and to use peer-to-peer supports. We're planning on putting the community gardens there. We know that for aging in place and aging well, nutrition is very significant and important. So building those community gardens, working those community gardens on our site, will eat that food, but also people will receive nutritional counseling through peer support and be able to take that home with them. And again, it becomes part of a program. Social connection and opportunities to be part of a social group, social engagement, again, are extremely important to aging well and aging in a healthy way.
We've got a minute and a half before the 10
Sorry.
minutes.
Then we better go quick here. Okay, benefits, care close to home, giving back to the community, over 250 jobs, and they are recession-proof jobs. We are a transfer payment agency of the ministry, so these are jobs that have pensions associated with them, benefits. It's a great opportunity for employment, and I do just want to highlight here the living classroom. We are doing a partnership with Georgian College, and we will be providing education for PSWs, RPNs, up to RPNs. So the innovation piece is campus of care, the building design, the models of care, which is Butterfly, and that's a dementia care model where we don't objectify people. It's about living with people in their dementia journey. Staff or family members, we've reduced absenteeism through introducing this model of care. This is what a butterfly model design looks like. You can see the small households, so not a great big box, but smaller households, so more of a cottage design, and where people sit with, have smaller dining rooms and have smaller living areas and social areas. And I'm just going to skip over that slide since I'm late, because I want to show you. This is what a corridor in one of our homes looked like before we introduced the butterfly model. Beige is great. We do a lot of beige in Canada. We knew we could do better. With the butterfly, how do we engage people with dementia? Everybody has their own front door, and here's a picture of one. Families and with the resident help select their front doors. You can see the colors. The colors are very bold. They're 5 to 7 shades deeper on a color chart, and they are in 10 to 12 foot segments, and the colors mean something. And this is what our home area looks like. You saw that beige. This is what it looks like now. This is adding the stuff of life. It's a lounge. There's our sports wall. There's one of our homes in St. Catharines. That's only the second accredited butterfly home in all of Ontario, in Burton Manor, and Henley Place in London. And there's Emmanuel, and he's 104 years old, and he lives in one of our homes with his dog.
Okay, thank you very much. Good presentation. Before we open it up to question and discussion, I just want to turn it over to Director Spagnell to discuss the planning considerations.
Thank you, Mayor Allen. I think firstly, I think everyone can recognize that there's a need for these types of developments and this type of care, these types of facilities. However, what we're dealing with in this specific area with respect to properties that are located within the Greenbelt, based on the delegation, that's where this property is located, there are some policy considerations that would have to be addressed prior to deal with land use approvals and set the permissions in place for a facility of this nature. Those land use considerations would include the need for official plan amendments, zoning bylaw amendments, consideration for the provision of services. Those are the three key considerations that would have to go into providing the land use approvals for a development of this nature. The municipality is currently is currently working through its official plan review process. The Greenbelt is slated as an item for consideration, at least based on the comments that have been received to date. But I think it would be appropriate just to identify that there are some land use considerations that have to be dealt with in order to facilitate a facility of this nature.
We didn't see a map in this presentation, so maybe you could describe a little bit more specifically what property we're talking about here.
Thank you, Mayor Allen. The property would be located on the east side of Bayfield Street, just as you leave the city of Barrie. So it would be driving into Springwater on the right side. I'm pretty sure it'd be just past the motel. Is my recollection, without having a map in front of me, but I believe it's tucked in behind there in that general area. I can confirm that is within the Greenbelt area, though, as far as the official plan, the township's official plan.
Before we get to discussion questions, can I have a mover and seconder to get this on the table? Deputy Mayor Coughlin, Councillor Cabral. Questions, comments? Councillor Hanna?
Thank you. Question to our presenters. When you met with Councillor Moore and myself, I don't know how, but somehow reason I got the impression there was a deadline that you needed to get approval from the province or something for funding or to get the allotment of beds. Could you just confirm that for me?
Yes.
Sorry, go ahead.
You go ahead.
Through you, Your Worship, to Councillor Hanna, there is a application deadline, an RFP application deadline imposed by the Ministry of Long-Term Care of the Province of Ontario of March 31st of this year. So we are preparing the RFP on the basis of a reply to that March 31st deadline.
Thank you, and just for the rest of council's attention, when we're done with our questioning, I have a motion I'd like to put forward to support this.
Councillor Cabral?
Thank you, Mayor Allen. Just as far as location is concerned, I've brought up Google Maps here. I can see where the motel is, but also looks like a lot of green space in behind where the Ultramar gas station is. If you're familiar with that, it's before the motel. Would that be the spot we're talking about, or is it further down from the motel?
No, through Your Worship, the property has a frontage on Bayfield Street and flags or wraps behind the motel. coming back towards Barrie. There is one intermediary property that is tangent to the Barrie line, but it wraps behind the motel and where the EMS station is there.
Okay, I see it then. Thank you. Follow up, please.
Yes, follow up.
Thank you. I just, a couple of comments here, I guess I wanted to make with respect to this. It certainly sounds fairly robust to my way of thinking. I can certainly see how it would help assist with people going into the hospital by making more beds available. But one of the other things I think this tends to do that maybe we don't think about is it also opens up more residential housing, because many of these people are still living at their home, and then when they do move out, that piece of property, that house or that residence becomes available as well. So I think you can kind of look at both sides of that coin, but it certainly sounds very, very good.
How would access and egress occur from Bayfield Street, and what would be the plan with respect to servicing?
So with regards to access, there is a significant frontage on Bayfield. We do not have a traffic study at this point in time to present to council. Obviously, we would have to follow all of the normal protocols of any development application for access there. And if there were improvements, we would have to obviously, if there's highway improvements, for example, that would obviously be to our account. With regards to servicing, we respectfully request, and it's within our ask of council, that the council would encourage Barrie to have an intermunicipal agreement in a similar fashion that they did for Tallendale Village on Big Bay Point Road. Because we're at the conceptual stage, and because we're at the stage where we have to apply to an RFP to get a license, it is inappropriate for us to go that next step at this juncture, because without a license, we're going nowhere. And that would be a waste of the time of this fine body and others.
Just to further on the access, so in your plan, would access have to be on the slope of Bayfield Street?
Your worship, I believe it is not on the slope. I believe it's just before the slope. That's on the bay, towards the Barrie orientation.
Okay, Deputy Mayor Coughlin.
Thank you, Marilyn, and through you to Director Spagnell. I recall maybe 2 years ago, we had a similar application for property in Springwater across from the hospital, and the same concern was the joint service agreement with the city of Barrie. And can you refresh my memory as to whether it was just a hard no from Barrie or what that process looked like?
Dr. Spagnell?
Thank you, Mayor Allen, through to Deputy Mayor Coughlin. At that time, you're correct, there was a similar consideration. At that time, the city of Barrie had said that they would entertain cross-border servicing, provided that that development did not compete with any of their strategic goals. So in other words, meaning that if it's a development that they want to see in the city of Barrie, potentially, that they might not want to service something that they want to see within the city boundaries. Now that said, the same resolution from the city of Barrie was considered by council at a later date, at which point it was determined that the municipality would not do additional work to go and take a look at those opportunities, and it would be left to private applications. So I'm summarizing and I'm paraphrasing what the city's position was on it, but it wasn't a hard no with respect to servicing. The policy issues that I'm referring to are really provincial policy issues, where development needs to be directed to settlement areas. Development of this nature would need to be directed to settlement areas. There would need to be servicing in place, and all of those boxes would have to be checked off in order for a development to occur of this nature. But just to reaffirm, it was not a hard no from the city of Barrie regarding cross-border servicing. That would be a high-level consideration between the municipality and the city, along with the county as well.
Councillor Moore?
Thank you, Mayor Allen. I just want to also state that what was applied for a couple of years ago is we're in a different position now than we were then. So from the ministry level, they recognize that these beds we're in a critical state now for these beds. And I really think that the the bylaws and the red tape that was in the way before is not going to be the same now. Because there is a push to be shovel-ready. We're already behind. And when we did meet, you mentioned that you were having a meeting with MPP Downey. So I wonder if you could just enlighten us on how that went. Thanks.
Thank
Please.
you, and through your worship to Councillor Moore. Yes, I did meet with Mr. Downey last Friday, and he has offered his full support. In fact, he is writing a letter of support that will be appended to this application to the Ministry of Long-Term Care, and he has offered his services and support in any way that's required, including if there are issues in terms of getting services or issues with zoning, because the objective of the government right now is to get these long-term care beds built. There are 15,000 of which there are no shovels in the ground right now. And so they want to get these beds going and built because you could see from the slide that I talked about the demand, the issue, the hallway healthcare will not end, the issue with no access to hospital beds for people who need them will not end until we get appropriate capacity. And in fact, in my conversation with Mr. Downey on Friday, he asked me, he said, what is this, Jill, in your 38 years experience as a nurse, where does this capacity problem, or where does this ALC problem come from? And it's a straight up capacity problem. There are not enough beds. And so these homes, they're big developments. They take at minimum, when the shovel goes in the ground, 24 months to build and become fully operational. These are licensed facilities. So there's a lot of requirements, design standards, lots of requirements in the legislation to meet as well. So these aren't easy to build. These aren't easy to bring to opening and through to operation. So there's a period of time once that shovel goes in the ground before we could even see these beds come online. So Mr. Downey again offered his full support and anything that he could do in order to advance this project. And in fact, we will be appending his letter of support to the application to the Ministry of Long-Term Care.
Councillor Cabral?
Thank you, Mayor Allen, through you. I'm just looking back here, and you may have mentioned it, but what is the size of this parcel of land that we're talking about?
Through the mayor. It's north of 20 acres.
Okay, thank you.
And if I could add just a little anecdote
Yes.
on there, if you would allow me the indulgence. I've had the opportunity to see seniors villages in other jurisdictions. I've been to Denmark, I've been to Holland. And what is very important, about a seniors village is the fact that that village allows peer-to-peer supports, which really allows seniors to flourish. We know from the work that we've done with various service providers in the jurisdiction that forget about the numbers. The demand is real, and the fact is that what they're classifying as the north end, or the area north of Barrie, is underserviced specifically. There are other applications going in, but not in this jurisdiction that we're mindful of. Perhaps you are mindful of them that we're not. And this is, I say respectfully, an opportunity that last occurred about 10 years ago. So I would like to place that forward for consideration to the council.
Director Spagnell, if we were to move forward with this in the Greenbelt, would that set a precedent with respect to development within the Greenbelt surrounding parts of Springwater?
Thank you, Mayor Allen. I think the term precedent, I think any any decision that council makes with respect to the Greenbelt would set a precedent where there would be other property owners who would be looking for some sort of consideration. However, the nuances and the reasons to why council is making that decision may be different from property to property. So there's always the danger of precedent when you're dealing with considering providing for some sort of an approval that goes outside the regular standard process or the planning process. So I think that's an exposure that council is really opening itself up to from a precedent standpoint. And I say that because the planning process is set up in a way where there's land use permissions that would need to be obtained for such a development and for these types of care facilities. And by stepping outside that land use planning permissions structure, you're opening yourself up to a precedent.
Councillor Hannah?
Thank you. Just a question, Mayor, through to the Director of Planning. Several years ago, we approved a policy or adopted a policy, if you like, that we would approve any development in the Greenbelt area that was advantageous to our township, including commercial development and so on. I don't remember the exact wording, but it wasn't like we said no to develop in the Greenbelt area. We did say we would consider such projects.
Director Spagno?
Thank you, Mayor Allen, through to Councillor Hannah. I think the wording really, I mean, when you take a look at the Greenbelt policy, it's to restrict new non-agricultural development in the Greenbelt. And the wording was really to go and consider specific opportunities within the Greenbelt along certain corridors. So it wasn't necessarily looking at full approval, but it was opening up the lines of communications to consider certain opportunities along those corridors. That said, there was a further resolution of council once the work was completed, which really left it to the private sector to come forward with private applications for council's consideration at a later date. So,
Follow on?
Thank you, Mayor, and I would suggest that that's what we have. We have private folks coming forward asking us to consider supporting something that this township needs, this area needs. So if, I don't want to assume that the rest of the council is going to support this, but I do have a motion I wanted to read if council is in favor of supporting this. So based on what council decides right here tonight, I'll have to change my wording on my motion.
Well, we have a motion here that we've got a mover and seconder, that it's being received. You could propose an amendment to that motion.
Thank you for your indulgence. Based on my seconder, I wanted to know if I need to change the wording. So basically what the motion that we've come up with, Mayor, is that moved by Councillor Hannah, second by Councillor Moore. Whereas council supports the Primacare project, staff are directed to assist in moving the project forward by applying their expertise to initiate any required exemptions to existing official plan conditions, zoning restrictions, policies, rules, or regulations that may impede the approvals. Further, given the close proximity to the City of Barrie, the council submit a written request to Barrie City Council informing them of the proposal, and given the benefits to the residents in the entire region, the support to RVH, and addressing the urgent need for long-term care beds, ask that consideration be given to any requests for the necessary cross-border services required for the Primacare project to proceed.
So that could be an amendment to this. Okay, that could be an amendment to this, which is already moved and seconded, so. For the amendment, right. Okay, discussion with respect to that. So, I would ask Director Spagno, given that amendment, what are your thoughts with respect to that?
thank you, Mayor Allen. I wish I could write as quick as I could hear.
It's coming to you. It's coming to you to read
It would
again.
be appreciated if I could get a look at the amendment just to try to
Yeah, it's right there.
absorb it and, thank you.
Just on the applying for a license process.
Yes.
Can you describe that a little bit more? You're applying for a license, it has to be location specific.
Your worship, the license is a request for proposal issued by the province. The RFP form has a number of elements of content. One of them specifically asks, do you have a location that you are applying for, or are you applying for a geography? we have applied for a location, and the location obviously is 727 Bayfield. The reason why we're applying for a location is unofficially, it is viewed upon as a more significant step that you've gone through and identified a property that would be suitable for the use and demand pursuant to your consultation with the health service providers in the area as to a good location. As well, you make certain promises within that RFP, and those promises include a campus, and you can't do a campus obviously on an acre. So you have to locate a piece of land that's going to be consistent with the promises you're making in the RFP.
And if they grant you that license and things don't work out, is that license transferable to another location?
The answer is, I don't know. Officially, not defined. Unofficially, yes.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Colgan?
Thank you, and through you. I was disheartened years ago when this came forward because it is an identified need and it is something that I believe we as a council through a previous resolution for something similar in a different area. We've agreed that it is an absolute need and I think the location is beautiful. I think that it, you know, as we grow, we can still help with the hospital being there. I would agree that the green belt is a sensitive issue and our chamber seems to fill up every time we talk about it. So I do appreciate that the amendment does speak to staff's expertise as we move forward with it because it is something we have to be cautious with. But thank you for bringing this forward to us and thank you for considering Springwater. I think that if we can get this going, it was disheartening when it was just red tape that a facility, another one in Springwater just didn't happen, so.
Councillor Moore?
Thank you, Mayor. While we're waiting then for Director Spagnell, I wonder if Ms. Knowlton could speak briefly to what the butterfly model is. Thank you.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor. The butterfly model is very unique. It's innovative. We have only the second fully accredited butterfly home in Ontario. It is.
Maybe you could flip back to the slide that shows it, please.
Sure, thank you. It moves care away from a very objectified approach. Right now, under the legislation that covers long-term care, it's called the Long-Term Care Homes Act. It really forces people to staff to follow lists. I call them, you know, the low fluid list, the doctor's list, the foot care nurse list, because people have to meet what we call the outputs, that you must document this, you must do this, you must follow through on this. It doesn't impact the outcomes at all. And that's a big issue because that is what lends itself to quality and people just being a number and being managed, their care managed as a number. The butterfly, it's a whole year-long transformation, culture transformation with staff. Staff are not called staff anymore, they're called family members. You've seen some of the environmental changes that occur. The environment is really just a very small part of it. It's around the culture, the way care is delivered in an emotion-focused way, where we relate to a resident wherever they are in their dementia journey. So it's not 2020. I'll give you an example. We have a resident who was a British spy, and she worked behind the line in Berlin in World War II. And you can imagine her behaviors, her paranoia are extreme with her dementia because people are speaking English, she's suspicious, there's all sorts of problems back and forth to the hospital with these behaviors and crises. In the butterfly model, we use virtual reality. She goes to Berlin every day, she speaks German, she eats German food, she drinks German wine. We have no behaviors. We took antipsychotic, which are very, very, very harmful medications, and they must be used very judiciously. We're at 57.9% use in our butterfly home. After 1 year, we dropped the use of those medications to 8.2%. It's phenomenal. We lifted the drug fog. People engage in life more. We have zero behaviors. We lifted the meds and the behaviors didn't increase. In fact, we now have zero. So we have less use of resources, less use of we don't transfer to hospital. We're able to take people who currently are sitting in a hospital bed, who other long-term care homes decline admission because of their behaviors, and we can safely house them and have them live with us in our butterfly, we call them households. Again, staff are family members. Staff are empowered to make decisions. There's no hierarchy in a butterfly home. In fact, our home action team leader in our butterfly home is a PSW. It is not the registered nurse. because he is the natural leader. And so staff rise to the occasion. They make decisions around their residents. They know them well. They know them so well that they should be telling us, and they're directing the care. It's not this hierarchical approach that's there. So our absenteeism has been reduced by 23%. Our staff turnover has reduced. Our staff injury has reduced. And in long-term care, if you're aware of the staffing crisis, that's really significant. Staff are happier, family are happier, and residents are much more comfortable and living a much more normal life wherever they are, whether it's 1944 or it's 1962. They pick their own front door. For many people, that's the front door from their own homes. That's how they recognize where to go. We have no restraints. We have zero weight loss. We have 15% reduction in pain. We have zero use of supplements. That's really significant. That has a big cost to it as well, to the system, and yet we successfully are able to maintain people in these lovely butterfly homes. And the other comment I would like to make, if you would just indulge me here, is that we get on airplanes and we travel over to the Netherlands, over to Sweden, certain pockets of Japan to look at these innovative care models. Nobody's getting on planes and coming to Ontario to look at what we're doing in long-term care. It's a rear view approach right now. This is the forward-looking way, vision forward way for care. And I will tell you, these purpose-built, bespoke butterfly homes have the eyes of the world on them. This location will have the eyes of the world on it. There's all sorts of research going on. This will be a research and innovation hub here around innovation and models of care. I'm speaking basically globally right now around this model, and we have nothing to compare it to in Ontario. Our home in Hamilton that's just about ready to get set to be built is the first bespoke butterfly home in all of Canada. So it is really exciting opportunity for this area, and just in terms of the wellness and the quality that's provided through this model. And I will also say that the Ministry of Long-Term Care is extremely interested in this model. We have had most sitting cabinet ministers, senior bureaucrats coming through the home butterfly home to see it firsthand, and many of them are highly impacted at the difference. I can't describe it, but just it feels different. It's different. It's a different way of caring for people in a much more humanistic and dignified way.
Okay, thank you. All right, so I'll read the amendment, and I think Councillor Hanna probably has a comment with respect to it. So whereas Council supports the primary care project, and this was the part that was suggested by Director Spagnell to change staff act as a resource to assist with providing information relative to the proposal, to the existing official plan, conditions, zoning restrictions, policies, rules, or regulations that may impede the approvals. And Councillor Hanna and Councillor Moore wanted the wording to be, whereas Council supports the primary care project, staff are directed to assist in moving the project forward by applying their expertise to initiate any required exemptions to the existing official plan, et cetera, et cetera. So do you have a problem with Director Spagnell's suggested wording?
Yes, I do, thank you. Mayor, to be blunt, council is elected by the residents, as we know, to represent them and do the best thing for the residents. Staff have to follow the rules and policies. I believe it's our responsibility and the onus on us to direct staff when we see something that needs to be done to help them, if you like, make changes or work outside of the existing policies and procedures. We've done the same for a facility in Elmville that's outside the settlement area, and we're prepared and supported that. And I think that we need to do the same thing for this. This is a crisis situation if you listen to the presenters, and even if we approve this, it'll be 2 to 3 years before it actually accommodates the people that need the accommodations. So I'm suggesting that we as council need to provide the direction and the leadership to get this done.
Deputy Mayor Coughlin?
Thank you, Mayor Allen, and through you, I absolutely want to support that this moves forward. The problem I have is with the direction to staff to work outside the policy and procedures, which is exactly why there was no staff report attached with the last support of an MZO, because we cannot ask our staff to work outside policies or their codes of ethics. So I think that in my experience, our staff, and works very well with all stakeholders and proponents that come to Springwater. So, I mean, we're simply just asking that they work with them. So I think that the wording could just be work with Primacare to move this forward. So I don't like the idea of anything that says that we're directing staff to work outside or beyond.
Mayor, please. I'm
Councillor
not
Hanna?
suggesting, if you read that carefully, I'm not suggesting they work outside of the policies. I'm suggesting they do whatever necessary changes can be made to those policies to accommodate this.
Staff are directed to assist in moving the project forward by applying their expertise to initiate any required exemptions to the existing official plan, et cetera, and versus staff act as a resource to assist with providing information relative to the proposal. Director Spagno.
Thank you, Mayor Allen. I think really, I mean, staff's role is to assist and provide information and to guide people through the process and provide information relative to that process. As a municipal planner, staff cannot move forward and try to expedite applications, cannot expedite proposals. They're not in a position to do that because there's a conflict of interest with respect to their roles as being municipal planners. Ethically speaking, what the municipal role of a planner is to do is to provide information, assist, and provide resources, but not to facilitate and carry forward applications for various groups. And I think by just taking a look, in general terms, taking a look at this motion, is it's asking staff to do something that staff is not empowered to do, even from the standpoint of changing policy. Staff cannot change policy. Staff can guide the applicant, staff can guide property owners as to what the process is based on the legislation and the policies that are in place. And that's pretty much as far as staff can go. Looking at this on the other side, if staff was to be directed to carry forward this application and there was to be a challenge by way of LPAT, in essence, what would happen is staff would be acting on behalf of a property owner instead of council, because there could be conflicting positions from a land use perspective, which, again, what it does is it puts staff in an unnecessary conflict, and it puts staff in a position in which, quite frankly, that's not what our role is here at the municipality. There's an ethical consideration here being a municipal planner.
Thank you.
That's
I agree with that. And Councillor Hanna, the example of Elmville, that's why staff cannot be advocating for the Elmville situation, both at a municipal level or at a county level. And that's why we're ending up with an MZO application potentially up in Elmville. So to draw that analogy or make that comparison, I don't think is accurate. So I think it's a big leap to be looking at developing something in the Greenbelt. I could support this, but I won't support the wording that you have in that first paragraph. I would support it as just outlined by Director Spagno. Councillor Moore?
Thank you, Mayor Allen. I think most importantly is that we're not throwing up roadblocks. So we don't want roadblocks to the project. And if that can be done working within the policies that we have, within the official plan that we have, I'm fine. But I don't want, the Greenbelt is subjective, and I don't want that kind of subjectiveness inserted into this project. Thank you.
Councillor Ritchie?
Thank you, Mayor Allen, through to the Director of Planning. With the one up in Elmville, we supported the fact of them with a letter to go to the minister for a minister's order because it's outside the settlement boundary line, and much the same here. Could we not do the same thing moving forward to accommodate these people? A minister's order seems to trump everything, so can we not apply that same process here?
Director Spagno?
Thank you, Mayor Allen, through you to Councillor Ritchie. Through that process, staff had met with the Elmville Active Seniors groups to provide information, provide assistance as to what the process would entail, to outline the key reports that would have to be considered, to outline potentially some of the obstacles they may face based on the property and based on the policy regime as information and as a resource. When you're getting into MZOs, that is a political consideration, and that really does go beyond the mandate and the powers, the mandate of staff. So the quick answer is that is the same approach that could be utilized in this instance here.
Okay, Councillor Hanna?
Thank you. I'm not trying to be rigid or hard-nosed about this. I just want to see us get it done. And my belief is that if we provide direction to staff as council, that might get it done. But if we have to change the wording in order to get staff, or give staff the ability to get it done, I'm prepared to do that. But long as it was pointed out, if there's roadblocks there, be it our official plan, be it zone amendments or whatever, we don't let this stop us from accomplishing something that important.
Councillor Cabral?
Thank you, Mayor Allen. Just a comment with respect to that. Just listening to both sides of the coin. At the end of the day, what ends up happening is these recommendations and zoning amendments and whatnot, they end up coming back before this council, and this council is the one that makes the determination on which way it's going to go. And to be quite frank with you, this here Greenbelt here with the Midhurst secondary plan coming online is becoming less and less insignificant in my mind as far as what might be able to go in there. And I think from Councillor Hanna's proposed amendment there, what I'm really getting from it is if there is a roadblock that pops up that needs some attention from council to have this move forward again, I don't see it necessarily as a conflict on behalf of the planning department so much as a decision of council how we overcome that roadblock. So I don't know how we can accommodate that in the resolution so that if there's a roadblock that comes up, it comes back before council, and then council as a whole can decide whether or not we're going to keep moving forward with it. Personally, myself, I see this as an opportunity for not just Springwater Township, but for everybody who lives in this area, and certainly to put some relief on the RVH, because they're looking at a major expansion now because they don't have the facilities and they don't have the room. So whatever we can do to make this move forward, I'm all for it, 100%.
So Councillor Hanna, given the discussion that we've had and the statements made by Director Spagnell, then if the wording, whereas council supports primary care project, staff act as a resource to assist with providing information relative to the proposal with respect to existing official plan, conditions, zoning restrictions, policies, rules, or regulations that may impede the approvals. Further, given the close proximity to the City of Barrie, that council submit a written request to Barrie City Council informing them of the proposal, and given the benefits to the residents in the entire region, the support of RVH, and addressing the urgent need for long-term care beds, ask that consideration be given to any request for the necessary cross-border services required for the primary care project to proceed. You are all right with those changes? Okay, good. All right, before we vote, any other comments? All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the
Oh,
opportunity
sorry,
to
the main
present.
motion, yeah. That the delegation from Matthew Melchor and Jill Knowlton from Primary Care Living Solutions, Inc. regarding the development of seniors campus of care at 727 Bayfield Street North be received. All those in favor? Carried. I don't have to read that. Yeah, that's, and that's as amended, Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, moving on, question period. Members of the public are invited to ask questions or make comments with regards to items on the agenda. Any person wanting to make a question, come forward, please. State your name and address, speak into the mic. And you have maximum 2 minutes.
Mrs. Yasmina Radosavljevic Sheldrick, 1060 Bayfield Street North, Midhurst, Ontario. My question is, if you were to overrule the green belt and just allow them to build there, what access would they have, and how is the MTO going to approve this access? when 90% of us who are on Bayfield Street are denied commercial access by MTO, who I've been informed rules Bayfield Street all the way from the city of Barrie down. That's number one. Number
Okay,
two.
let me address number one. That is a challenge. MTO has very definite rules. That's why I brought up the question. So we can't definitively answer that tonight. That's going to be one of the hurdles that these proponents are going to have to address and consider and deal with MTO. So
The question also is, if MTO allows them, shouldn't the council then state and request that the rest of the people on Bayfield Street be given the same courtesy and the same access? Because those properties have been there much longer than this new development.
well, I think we're projecting into the future, but
Okay.
we just said that they have a hurdle to potentially get MTO to agree, and based on the results of that exercise, other businesses, residents would have to govern themselves accordingly.
And as far as Mr. Jack Hanna's comment, no, I don't believe that.
Okay, no, what's
The
your?
councillor
No,
comment?
no, we're not.
Oh, sorry. The other concern that I have is to staff to assist in getting this development through. Shouldn't that be an election issue or put to vote to the citizens that do live to allow this green belt to be allowed to put, and couldn't this structure be put somewhere else in Springwater Township where it would not affect the green belt?
I think we just stated that the decision of council with respect to this item is congruent with the motion that was passed by previous council, and this council seems, by the vote you just saw, to be willing to make selected exceptions on a case-by-case basis with respect to the green belt.
Okay. The other question I have, a lot of the properties in the official plan.
Excuse me?
You said I got 2 minutes. I'm
Yes.
trying to rush it.
Yeah, well, I think you're at your 2-minute level. Deputy Mayor Coughlin?
My apologies, Mayor Allen, and I just wanted to make sure that if there was any other residents in the audience this evening that had any other questions, as we only have 10 minutes.
Yes.
And
Yep.
also that our council this evening did not vote to approve, we voted to endorse
Move
and
I got that.
support. Yes, thank you.
I got that part.
Okay.
I got that part.
Okay.
But my question was, a lot of the properties on Bayfield Street in the official plan were listed as EP2 properties. And a lot of these people have issues having it removed. So what is this particular property has the benefit over us
Well,
who have been
you're
here?
drawing conclusions that aren't even close to being drawn, so
Okay,
it's sometime in the future. So thank you very much for your questions.
yeah.
Anybody else have questions?
No, not right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, moving forward to 6.1, adoption of minutes of council. Can I have a mover and second to get this on this table, please? Councillor Moore, Councillor Chapman. That the minutes of council listed herein be approved as presented. Any comments about these? The minutes are the special meeting of council Feb 1920 and the minutes of regular council Feb 1920. All those in favor? Carried. Next are the minutes of boards, committees, and organizations. Mover and seconder, Councillor Cabral, Deputy Mayor Coughlin. Any questions with respect to these? Motion is that the minutes of boards and committees and other organizations listed herein be received as information. The Heritage Advisory Committee meeting, Jan 28-20. The Recreation Advisory Committee meeting, Jan 28-20. The Elmvale Business Improvement Area Board meeting, Jan 16-20. All those in favor? Carried. Next, we move to item 7, correspondence and information items. The first one is 7.1. Can I have a mover and a seconder to get this on the floor, please? Councillor Cabral, Deputy Mayor Coughlin. And this is a motion that council for the Corporation of Township of Springwater hereby approves the donation request of Elmvale District High School in the amount of $500 for their annual commencement. Any discussion or questions with respect to this? Councillor Cabral.
Thank you, Mayor Allen. I'm just curious if we know roughly how long this particular practice has been going on with council supporting the Elmvale District School for their commencement. I know it's happened. I suspect it's been going on for some period of time.
CAO Schmidt, you didn't hear that question because you're just coming into the room. The question was, any recollection of how long the annual or the donation to the Elmvale District High towards their commencement of $500 has been going on?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Sorry about that. Essentially, I've been with the township since 2013. I believe it's been at least that time, if not before my time, so.
So long-standing tradition.
Okay.
Thank you.
Do you have a comment or voting?
Just a comment, in 2010, I think we were giving them 300, I think since then we've upped it to 5.
Okay.
So it's been at least since 2010.
All those in favor? Carried. 7.2, can I have a mover and a seconder to get that on the table, please? Deputy Mayor Coughlin, Councillor Chapman. This is that the Council of the Corporation of Township of Springwater hereby approve the donation request from the Simcoe Shores Secondary School in the amount of $500 for their annual commencement with funds. I'll leave it there, annual commencement. Deputy Mayor Coughlin.
Thank you, Mayor Allen. I will not be supporting this request this evening. I would be curious if someone from Simcoe Shores Secondary School would be interested to come in and do a delegation for us. As a community, we have students who go to various high schools beyond Elmvale. The reason that we do support Elmvale is because they're Springwater students. So if we start supporting schools that may or may not have residents from Springwater at them, I would just caution or ask the rest of council if maybe we can wait and see if the Shores will come forward. But I will not be supporting this evening. Rather than asking for an amendment, I will just be voting against it.
Other comments? Councillor Cabral.
Yes, Mayor Allen, I think stepping back to past practice with, it seems to be past practice with Elmville High School. Just about every kid that goes there is from within the township. Therefore, I don't have any difficulty, but I can't say the same for this particular school. I don't know whether any of our students go there, although we do have other schools in Barrie where Springwater Township students do go, and we're not providing for them, and there's been no request either. So
Okay.
I support Deputy Mayor Coughlin's thoughts.
Okay, all those in favor of the motion? Opposed?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, there has been previous donations to this organization, even the last 3 or 4 years anyways, I believe.
Yes, sorry, Marilyn, and through you, just procedurally, on some of the resolutions, it states where the funds would be allocated from. Is it moving forward, just practice if there's a donation to be made, that we understand that it comes from the mayor's golf tournament? Or where are we gonna put all this from?
That was a joke.
No, I didn't say your actual personal account. It was from the Springwater Swing. Like, where does this?
I'm seeing a nodding head here. CAO Schmidt, do you have?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to members of council. So items 7.1 and 7.3 are actually items that we have included in the annual budget over the last number of years because they have been repetitive, if you will. However, 7.2 is a new request, and hence why there is no funding source associated with that.
Okay, the motion's been read. All those in favor? That's carried. 7.4, with respect to MVCA, can I get this on the table? Mover and seconder, Councillor Cabral, Deputy Mayor Coughlin. And the motion is that the correspondence from Nottawasaga Valley Conservation Authority regarding the municipal contribution levy be received. And before we have discussion of this, I'm going to turn it over to CAO Schmidt to update us further to this letter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So through you to members of council. Members of council may recall that during the 2020 budget deliberations, there was a request from the NVCA to essentially increase their 2020 general levy by approximately $6,400. And council did pass a resolution during the budget session, our deliberations indicating to essentially remain at a 0% increase, so at the same level as 2019. So essentially, what we're looking at here is a $6,400 discrepancy, if you will. So the letter, we did send a letter to, the township did send a letter to the NVCA in December indicating what council's resolution was. And in lieu of that, we've now received this letter that's on the agenda this evening. So with that, I reached out to the CAO of the NVCA to try to arrange for a meeting, which we did have on February 26th. So the mayor, the deputy mayor, myself, along with the chair, the vice chair, and the CAO for NVCA met with the hope that we would be able to come up with some kind of options and a resolution to this. Unfortunately, we were advised that the Conservation Act is very prescriptive, and that Section 27 of the Act requires that a municipality against which a levy is made may appeal the levy to the Mining and Lands Tribunal, and this appeal must be commenced within 30 days after the municipality receives notice of the levy from the authority. So essentially, in the letter, it does indicate that February 28th, so last Friday, would have been the end of that 30-day time frame. And again, based on the discussion that we had last Wednesday, we weren't moving to any kind of a resolution. So I directed staff to commence the appeal process due to the timing. So this evening, I guess I would be looking for council's official direction as to whether you wish to continue with this appeal or whether you wish to do something different. With that, I will provide a little bit more information from a few other neighboring municipalities. So Oro Medonte went through this appeal process back essentially 8 or 9 years ago, and I've been advised by them it took about 1.5 years to 2 years to resolve, and it ended up costing them approximately $25,000 to $30,000 in legal fees, and they were required to pay the levy, so they were denied. Last Wednesday, Oro Medonte, I had another discussion about their 2020 levy, because they have also had a similar but slightly different resolution to essentially not pay the 2020 levy. And they went into closed session last Wednesday, and essentially they authorized their CAO to pay the levy, and they're not appealing. One other municipality, that being Ramera, different conservation authority, they're in the Lake Simcoe Region Conservation Authority area. Back in 2017, I believe it was, they also decided that they didn't want to pay their levy. And so I believe in 2018 and 2019, they haven't paid those levies, and they haven't paid anything for 2020 yet. They have not incurred any legal fees, to my understanding. Essentially, they have filed an appeal. They have had an agreement with the Lake Simcoe Region Conservation Authority that neither one of them would seek legal action against each other until essentially there's some decision from the province regarding some of the ongoing consultations that are happening right now with the Conservation Act. So if council wishes to continue with the appeal, staff's kind of recommending that we pay the first, second, and third quarter levy amounts as required, because the Act does state that even though you may file an appeal, you are still required to pay the levy. So staff's recommending that we pay the first, second, and third quarter levy amounts. However, we would see where things are at towards the end of this year with any proposed changes to the Conservation Act, and at that time we can make a decision as to whether or not we pay the full amount to them and or we make adjustments to that last quarterly payment to them. So I'll leave it at that.
CAO Schmidt, as part of the discussion, can you also touch on the, I believe, close to $7,000 amount that was the MOU payment that has been not acknowledged or hasn't been settled in previous years? It was identified as an amount of approximately $7,000, and how does that impact this potentially on a go-forward basis?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So again, through budget deliberations, council may recall that we do have a memorandum of understanding with the Nottawasaga Valley Conservation Authority. I believe back in 2015, 2016, there was a discussion whereby the level of service that was being provided by the NVCA versus the level of service provided by the SSEA, there was some potential overlap or duplication of services. I believe at the time it was identified that approximately, I think at the time it was actually around $6,500, I believe is what we were told the other day, was the differential. So essentially the town, that $6,500 was, the township was paying more money than what they needed to. That number is now approximately, according to the MVCA, when they did their budget presentation to council in the fall of last year, was $7,258. So the council did also provide direction to staff during the 2020 budget deliberations to withhold that amount. So we did have a bit of that conversation with the MVCA. Again, they're stipulating that we have an MOU with them. We need to abide by the MOU, and according to them, they expect payment of that $7,258. The MOU, I believe, comes up for renewal in 2021 or 2022. I have to double check that. So until then, they're willing to have a discussion, but not necessarily provide any kind of reduction to us.
Well, and the regulations, we were told in that meeting, they expect to come out in June of this year, to therefore be able to start to look at services of the MVCA, core versus non-core. Is that correct?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I believe there's actually one more consultation, I believe, next, actually tomorrow, I think it is, up in, I want to say North Bay, but up in that area. And it's the final consultation that I'm aware of. And then there is also an EBR that's out there right now where anybody can go on to the website and provide comments about the conservation authorities, not just Nottawasaga, it's all conservation authorities in Ontario. So to your point, I believe, subject to all of that and obtaining information or feedback through that process, there'll likely be some draft regulations provided, hopefully in June, July of this year.
Okay. Deputy Mayor Coughlin?
Thank you, Marilyn, and through that, further to that, the appeal process and just the costs associated with the appeal process and the mitigation process, we don't necessarily have to embark into additional costs. I mean, it's difficult when you sit there and you think $25,000, $30,000 to save 6 plus 7. So I mean, and it's difficult. But at the end of the day, we have been reaching out for 5 years with a service partner. We have reached out to our neighbors. We've reached out to the province. We're trying to make sure. And in that meeting, it was made clear that this is simply us advocating for our residents. Our residents are not pleased. They're not satisfied with the service. And in that discussion then, it was through the CAO of MVCA did ask, he did suggest that it may be beneficial for us to have an information session with the NVCA for us to fully or attempt to fully understand those things. So I do have an amendment to the resolution before us, and it would also include that we formally request that training session with them, because we do want to work with our service partners, but just handcuffing ourselves or just continuing to blindly to pay things is not, in my opinion, the best practice. So I would like to offer an amendment to the motion before us, and that it says, and that hereby direct staff to continue with the appeal of the 2020 municipal levy contribution, and that staff formally requests a training/information session with the NVCA.
Okay, discussion with respect to that. Councillor Cabral?
Thank you, Mayor Allen. I appreciate hearing about the other locations that had launched an appeal. I think the circumstances for us are a little bit convoluted at best with respect to what we've been paying for and the duplication of services and the reluctance, I would say, of the Conservation Authority to remedy that. So that's why I'm in agreement with continuing with the appeal process. I also think that there's many seems to be the other side of the coin where some municipalities, I don't know if it's because they're enamored with the services they're getting from their conservation authorities to the point where they're advocating for them and seeking to not have any funds reduced from the province. I certainly agree with that. But the other side of the coin, I think, is when a municipality is having some difficulties that don't seem to get resolved after years and years. So I think the appeal should go forward.
I have a question with respect to the amendment, Deputy Mayor Collier. You said the appeal, so does that refer to the levy portion only or both portions?
I would assume both portions, but that would be with staff, because we can't, appealing the 7,000 part of the MOU, is that what you're speaking to?
Yep.
That was part of our previous resolution, so we're basically just saying to move forward with the previous resolution.
Okay. Any further questions or discussion?
Is that correct, Director Schmidt?
So you're appealing, the question is that, you're appealing both, and from my opinion, I think there's, the levy portion is definitely has potential as for an appeal, but the other, I'm not sure how strong a footing we have to stand on with respect to that. I'll get Director Schmidt to, CEO Schmidt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to members of council, my understanding is that the act is prescriptive on the levy. The MOU, I don't believe is required by the act. I think that's one part of the regulation. I think we entered into it with the SSEA and the MVCA outside of the Conservation Act, if you will. I don't think it's required. It may be required as part of the new regulations. So to your point, Mr. Bear, I'm not sure that we can appeal that, but it is something that staff can take back and further look into.
Okay.
But at this stage, I'm not sure.
Councillor Ritchie, did you have a comment?
Yes, Mayor Allen, I just want to make a comment. I support the appeal, and I think moving forward that we reach out with other members in the watershed that are feeling the same way we do. Numbers matter, and the more we speak. I did fill out that survey this afternoon, as a matter of fact, and threw my 2 cents worth in there, and I think moving forward, we'll see where all this comes from, but they're hearing loud and clear. But I support the appeal. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Hanna?
Thank you, Mayor. For clarification, will we be paying the first quarter payments and just appealing the last? Is that what the motion is?
CEO Schmidt?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Hanna, that's what staff's recommending to ensure that we are at least remain in compliance with the act until, I guess, till further discussion with respect to the appeal. So again, the act does require that we pay the levy. We pay it in quarterly amounts, so I'm recommending that we pay what they're requesting, but the final payment for the 2020 year will be subject to whatever adjustments we consider to be what we want.
Okay, I'll read the amendment again. Did you have a comment? Sorry, Councillor Chapman.
Thank you, Mayor Allen. Just a question, I'm not understanding. What if we don't pay those first, second, and third?
CEO Schmidt?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Good question. I guess the likelihood is the NVCA would likely probably start litigation against the township, whereas hopefully by us being in compliance with it until such time, maybe they will pause.
The amendment reads, and that council hereby directs staff to continue with the appeal of the 2020 municipal levy contribution, and that staff formally request a training/information session with MVCA. All those in favor? That's carried. And the main motion that the correspondence from NVCA regarding a municipal contribution levy be received, and that council hereby directs staff to continue with the appeal of the 2020 municipal levy contribution, and that staff formally request a training information session with the MVCA. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you. Moving on to action items 8.2 through 8.9. Are there any that people want to have pulled first, or comments? Councillor Moore? you'd like to have pulled or questions?
We can pull it. Thank you.
Okay, then, can I have a mover and seconder with respect to the others? Counselor Chapman? Yes, Counselor Ritchie.
I want to speak to poll 8-3.
8-3, okay.
And the 8-5.
Your microphone, please.
Sorry,
And
Alan.
8-5?
Yes, please.
Okay, and you're moving the rest of them then?
I will.
Seconder, please. Counselor Cabral. That the action reports 8-2 through to 8-10 be received, and that the recommendations contained herein be approved as presented. 8.2, Snow Valley Highlands Phase 5, final acceptance and release of securities. 8.6, community safety and well-being. 8.7, site plan amendment SP 219-003, Alex Curry Motors Limited, 2 Curry Drive. 8.8, Vesper Valley Estates Phase 3 consent agreement authorization. 8.9, RR 219-004, mixed plan of subdivision, red line revision. And 8.10, lift hold application of 119-4233 Ontario Limited regarding the Eek Pit, with the exception of 8.3, 8.4, and 8.5 to be dealt with separately. All those in favor? That's carried. Okay, I'll do them in order here. 8.3, I believe that was Councillor Ritchie. That's the tandem truck with winter control attachments.
Thank you, Mayor Allen. To the Director of Public Works, I'm 10 years this year as a councillor, and every year I've always supported the idea of new trucks, and it's good to see our staff driving with decent equipment. In fact, the one year we bought 2 trucks. So, having said that, in regards to the buyback on the used truck, should we be keeping that as a spare? I think that's the question that I have, because I'm going to be alluding to that later on in the meeting.
Director Coleman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you to Councillor Ritchie. We actually have not licensed this unit at all this winter. It was too cost prohibitive to bring it up to standard, to license it, to use it as a spare. So once we purchase a new one, we will put another vehicle in use as a spare.
Thank you, Mayor Allen. Can you just briefly elaborate on what seems to be the problems? Is it, what the problems are with it?
Director Coleman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Councillor Ritchie, I can get the information and let you know. I just know that when it was up for safety, the list was a little bit long. I can send it to you.
Okay, 8.4 was Councillor Moore. Oh, yes, so we need to do that individually now, sorry. So you're moving that particular motion with respect to that item, and you're seconding that, Councillor
No,
Allen?
Mayor, I just wanted to follow up for clarification on the 8.3 as the result of Councillor Ritchie's
ahead.
question. Thank you. Through you to the Director. One time we used to have at least one extra truck. We had more trucks than we did drivers. Is that still the situation?
Director Coleman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Councillor Hanna. Yes, kind of. We do have a spare, but it's to be used when another one goes down. So right now we have basically the trucks that are in use each have an operator and each have a route.
Okay, I need a seconder on this 8.3, please. Councillor Chapman. That the report from the operations technician regarding tandem truck tender results dated March 4, 2020 be received, and that submission from Curry Truck Center for a new 2021 Freightliner model 114 SD tandem axle truck with Viking equipment and provisional items as required for an amount of $285,796.68 plus HST be accepted, and that the additional $826.70 required funding be drawn from the Public Works Capital Reserve, and that the trade-in funds for the unit number 14 being $21,000 plus HST be allocated to the Public Works Capital Reserve. All those in favor? Carried. Next, we have 8.4, Councillor Moore. Can I have a mover? You're moving this, and a seconder, Councillor Chapman. Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. So I was contacted today by a tow truck company owner and operator, one of two that work in the Springwater Township. And he had a couple of concerns about the draft bylaw. He forwarded to me the Oro Medonte regulations or bylaws that they have in place. And I would just like it if I could ask to have this deferred till our next meeting so that I have an opportunity to review what Oro is, what they do, and I know this was being compared to what Clearview does, and I'd like us to be somewhat consistent with how our tow truck operators are working and what the maybe licensing requirements are, and I know that that brings up a whole host of issues. But I would like if we could just support that this would be deferred till next meeting so I have an opportunity to do some homework.
So
Thank you.
you're proposing an amendment then? Yes. And do we have a seconder to that? Councillor Cabral? Councillor Cabral.
Thank you very much, Mayor Allen. I did have some concerns about this myself. It seems to me that the impetus for this is to protect our firefighters. That's kind of what I got from it. And I was wondering if it might not be easier with that respect rather than place them at certain distances and not permit the driver to come to the location where it's at to offer their services. If it might be better to have something in there where if the firefighter at the scene directs a tow truck driver to vacate or move. So that's just something else along those lines that maybe we could look at. Thank you.
Any other comments before we vote on this amendment? Okay, the amendment reads that the motion now before council be deferred to the March 18th to 20 regular meeting. All those in favor? Carried. And next is 8.5. I believe that's Councillor Ritchie. Lands abutting 105 Queen Street West.
Thank you, Mayor Allen. The reason why I'm bringing this up, and this is to our CEO Schmidt, I thought we purchased this land a few years ago. So looking at this, did we miss a piece or we're adding on to it, or could you enlighten me with that?
CEO Schmidt?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll actually defer this to Clerk Ainsworth. Sorry, I was going to say something else. Clerk Ainsworth, as she's been working on the actual file, she has more up-to-date information than I can provide.
Clerk Ainsworth.
Thank you. And through yourself to Councillor Ritchie, your comment is correct. It was missed through the lawyers when the original expropriation was proceeding. Through the ongoing process, it was noted that an easement would have been required through this piece of property, but as it was small and would square off the property for the Elmvale lift station and just a remnant piece of property, it was suggested by legal counsel that the township purchase the property outright instead of just putting an easement.
Can I count on you as a mover?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Allen.
Seconder for this, Councillor Moore. That the report from the clerk regarding the purchase of land with a whole bunch of letters, lands abutting 105 Queen Street West, Elmvale Lift Station, dated March 4, 2020 be received, and that the mayor and clerk be authorized to execute the necessary documents for the purchase of land at this location from the estate of Mary Margaret Whitten for a total value of $4,500 plus applicable fees, taxes, and legal costs. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you. Moving on to item 9, information reports. And we have one information report. Can I have a mover and seconder to get this on the floor, please? Councillor Moore, Councillor Chapman. And this is the report, Midhurst EA update on MECP conditions. I'll turn it over to CAO Schmidt to elaborate on the report, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you to members of council. So try to keep it somewhat high level. So back in November of 2019, as you recall, the township received a letter from Minister Urick regarding his decision on the Midhurst class environmental assessment. So essentially there was I don't want to state that these are insignificant. They are significant conditions, but essentially we've rolled them up into three main conditions, if you will. One being the species at risk condition, which includes the Heinz Emerald dragonfly. The second condition deals with source water protection and risk management plans, and then the third condition deals with odor mitigation plan for wastewater treatment facilities. So I just wanted to provide an update to council and the public as to where we stand with these conditions. We got the letter, staff along with our consultant from Ainley's, had a telephone conversation with the ministry to kind of make sure that we were clear on the wording of some of these conditions. So we have had that clarity provided to us. And just to be very clear to members of council and the public, these conditions are specific to the works that are included in the environmental assessment. So all the water, wastewater, and transportation works that are considered in the EA, these conditions apply to those only. They do not apply to the actual subdivisions. The subdivisions are under the draft plan conditions through LPAT, which are 150 plus conditions, I guess. So further to that, we have had an in-person meeting with the ministry of species at risk. So the director of Public Works, myself, as well as Ainley's, attended a meeting a couple weeks ago. Essentially, members from the development community were there, and members from the ministry were there. The developer provided an update on the conditions. More specifically, they have provided the ministry and the township with a draft of their species at risk plan. They have also provided an updated technical memorandum for the Heinz Emerald dragonfly. Again, these are just still in draft form, but they have been submitted to the ministry and to the township for review. On the source water protection policies, there was a conversation at that meeting. However, that division of the ministry is not responsible for source water, so it was more kind of a general conversation about kind of what's being done. They have the consultants for the developers have provided a mapping of the wells and the wellhead protection areas, which they'll be discussing shortly, I believe, with the Source Water Protection Authority, which is the NVCA, as well as the township will be included in those discussions. And then the third, the third condition, the odor mitigation plan, from our discussions or my understanding, and subject to Director Coleman's comments, I believe the odor mitigation plan is common practice when anybody is trying to move forward with a proposed wastewater treatment development or facility. So that will form part of the environmental compliance application or approval submission to the ministry once the developer is in a position to do so. So there will be ongoing discussions with the development community as well as the ministry over the next number of months, and we'll be involved to the extent that we need to be involved, and we'll be reviewing any submissions that the development community provides to us. However, ultimately, the ultimate decision will come from the ministry as to whether or not these conditions have been satisfied. So I think I'll leave it at that for now, Mr. Mayor, and if I'll take any questions that council may have.
Questions, comments? Nope, sounds good. So, okay, we are moving to seconder. What's the buzzing? Probably me. That the report items listed herein be received as information in the Midhurst EA update on the MECP conditions. All those in favor? Carried. Verbal reports, official plan update, economic development, Director Spagnell, any updates?
No updates to report, Mayor Allen.
Okay, thank you. County updates, Deputy Mayor Coughlin?
We have not had a county meeting due to the conference.
Yes.
Which I don't believe any member of Springwater attended.
The next county meeting is next Tuesday. Municipal updates, any municipal updates? Councillor Ritchie?
Thank you, Mayor Allen. Just give me a minute here. On Friday, February the 28th, I came into Elmville at approximately 4 p.m. in the afternoon. I noticed the roads had not been plowed. Yet I drove down the main street to Amelia Street, to William Street, then up Macaulay Avenue to Centennial Avenue to Shaw Street. Then I went along Nash Avenue to Graham Street, all the while noticing the roads have not been plowed. I then finished off by crossing Highway 27, went down Stone Street back to my office. I have an all-wheel drive vehicle with snow tires. I could barely get through. The next day, Saturday, February the 29th, I was at the Elmville Bake Shop, where I was confronted by someone who brought it to my attention. I then went to Foodland, where I was confronted again by several irate people. I then went to McDonald's for my morning coffee, and I was confronted again by angry people. Since my time on council, I've come up, and I'm coming up 10 years this year. I have every year supported the purchase of new plow trucks. A few years ago, we purchased 2 of them. Could the Director of Public Works explain to me and everyone listening tonight what happened? I know we were bombarded with a lot of snow, but we need to be better prepared for this. This is the second time this winter that this has happened.
Any comment, Director Coleman, with respect to this? I know it was an absolute mess that night before and the day of and part of Saturday.
Thank you, Mayor Allen. I will, I can review the GPS and see where our staff were that day. But as you do recall, it was an interesting day in terms of a fair amount of snow overnight and significant blowing and drifting. I do know that all of our staff were in and all of our resources were out. In terms of the specifics, I'll have to get back to you.
Deputy Mayor Coughlin?
Thank you, Mayor Allen, and that's unfortunate that experience happened. The same Friday, I had a completely different experience with our Public Works Department. I did go for, call it a ride-along, in the plow truck, and it was the arterial roads first, so yes, the subdivisions in the hamlets, they do get done last. I learned a lot. I think that it's definitely an extreme job, but that a ride-along is one's probably good enough for me. But as to where they are, during that ride-along, there was numerous calls between the shops and the foremen getting graders out to help plow trucks get moving again because they're stuck. There was also a call from our fire department where a plow needed to go and plow into a building, into a residence so that they could get in there. So I think that the irate or angry comments that you heard were unfortunate. I did post a video on Facebook, and it's definitely, people pay more attention to that than some of the issues that I put on there, but the comments from our communities thanking our Public Works Department for what they do and the hours they spent cleaning our roads up and keeping us safe, it was great, so thank you.
Okay, Director Coleman, thank you for looking into that, and Councillor Cabral.
Thank you, Mayor Allen. I just was wondering, I guess I have to say it, I did go into town on Friday as well, and I did receive some calls regarding the same thing. One of the things, I'm not sure if it was the case come Saturday, but it seemed that maybe the roads had just been plowed one way, and I certainly understand the dynamics behind the guys and the work crews being out that did a fabulous job. And I also understand that come the weekend, it presents, another unique set of difficulties with resetting clocks and resetting hours and things like that for the operators. But it would also kind of came to mind that I was somewhat remiss because the concessions did get plowed, and I would assume that there was a vehicle that would normally be assigned to Elmville. I'm wondering if there were any mitigating circumstances, or maybe the fact that this truck that is being replaced, would it have made a difference had that truck still been available, I guess is my question on that.
Well, I think Director Coleman has indicated she's going to look into it, and she'll be able to get back to us. Do you have a follow-on, Councillor?
First off, thank you, Mayor Allen. I think we need to distinguish between country and town. Like, I live in the country, and from my driveway down to 27, maybe over a little over a kilometer, I will go past 4 driveways. Now, if I take a kilometer and go through town, how many driveways did I pass? 50, 60, 100. But the concern that I have is that if our first responders or ambulance or anyways, why wasn't there just a road plowed down through or whatever? We need to be better prepared for this to happen. We knew in advance the storm was coming. I know the storm came. I know the people were out there. They're out there in the countryside, and yet a hamlet, a town of, I'm going to throw out a number, 2,000 people are sitting idle and can't move. This is not good. And I'd like to table a motion. Either I do it now and speak to this, or I wait to the notice of motion.
Well,
Your call.
No, I think we've heard your question. The director is going to look into it, and we're going to report back to us. So I don't feel a motion is necessary. Okay. Other municipal updates. Councillor Hanna?
Thank you, Mayor. If I'm wrong, I'll apologize in advance. But my unofficial sources tell me that young Hale Mahone, sitting in our audience as Springwater residents, has been sworn as the acting mayor of Barrie. I don't know if that's true or not, but if he is, I'd like to recognize him on behalf of council and Springwater and say congratulations.
Are you the ongoing youth mayor, or was this for the day, or what?
Yeah, it's for the next 3 weeks.
3 weeks. Good. Yes, Councillor Hanna.
Is there any financial compensation for that?
Okay, other municipal updates. Councillor Cabral?
Actually, yes, I do, Mayor Allen. I just want to start, pounding the horn or trumpeting it for the Maple Syrup Festival. April 25th. It seems like it's a long ways off, but it's not. So if you're watching, mark it in your calendar. It's a wonderful time. Hopefully we'll see everyone out again like we have in the past. Apparently there's going to be some log sawing happening. I just saw that.
Thank you. Any others? Okay. Next, we move on to notices of motion, and Councillor Ritchie has a notice of motion that he presented. Do you have a seconder for that, Councillor Ritchie? Councillor Moore? And it's that be it resolved that council direct the chief administrative officer to explain before council who has the authority to hire and fire staff personnel, and further that this council be part of the interview process for any director's position or any position that has direct access with council on or before the next scheduled council meeting. I'll start with Councillor Ritchie. Any comments you want to make with respect to
Well, I'm bringing this forward. If I go back a few council meetings to the asset coordinator, and I welcome the person. I still don't know her name, but it seems like I asked a question and I got shot down. So I'd like to be part of the process. I'd like other people to speak up as well too if they feel the same way. I think the part of the hiring process, especially on the director end of it, I welcome the fire chief, and it was nice to see you stay till the end of the last council meeting. But I shouldn't be reading a newspaper clip about you in the newspaper. I should be having you up here part of the process. I was elected to do that, and I would like to do that, and that's how I feel about that. I like to see where the rules are about who does what, where, and when. So I like to be part of the process, and I'm going to open up the floor to everybody else.
Okay, I'll start by turning to CEO Schmidt just to review the recent hiring process and how we came about to what has happened with respect to that, and then we can have discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you to members of council. So just wanted to comment on, I guess, the current hiring practice for the township, as I know it, and subject to change, obviously, is that, so since my coming into this position in September of 2019, we essentially have hired 3 senior positions. There was a director of finance, my replacement, in November, whereby we had members of council included in the interview process. We had the mayor, we had the deputy mayor, we also had Councillor Cabral. The reason being, those individuals, with the exception of the deputy mayor, form the Finance and Audit Committee, and hence we thought it would be appropriate to have those individuals in that interview process. We went through that process. Our Director of Finance has been hired. There was no questions from council at that time, no concerns at council at that time. We proceeded to advertise for the position of Director of Recreation, Parks and Facilities. We walked through that process. We we had the Deputy Mayor and Councillor Ma Chapman included in that interview process, along with the Manager of Human Resources and myself. Again, why those individuals? The thought is that those two individuals are on the Rec Advisory Committee, and hence why they were selected as being on the committee. Again, went through the process. We have hired our Director of Recreation, Parks and Facilities. No concerns, comments, or any phone calls, emails, or anything from members of council during that process. Hence, I thought we were following due process. Turn to the fire chief, who we have now hired and has started, and welcome Jeff to the team. He started on Monday of this week. We went through the process, and in February, or I guess January, February, that process we essentially brought the mayor, the deputy mayor, and we actually brought in the Simcoe County coordinator, fire coordinator, Mr. Dan Hayden, who's the fire chief for New Tech, based on his experience of volunteer firefighters and his years of service. And also he has participated in a number of recruitments for other municipalities for their fire chief. So we thought that would be appropriate. We went through that process. Obviously, like I said, we've hired our new fire chief, and now I'm sitting here having this conversation with council. So again, I have no concerns with having council involved in the interview process or in the hiring process. I guess from my perspective is I just need to know to what level do you want to be involved? Do you want to be involved in the selection of the candidates? Do you want to be involved in the interview process? Do you want to be involved in the final selection? And understanding that through all of that process, you know, we're trying to hire somebody, and usually these positions, sometimes we're competing with other municipalities, so the time frame of trying to get some of these interviews in place and having people in place, the timing sometimes has to happen fairly quickly, otherwise we potentially lose good candidates. So I'm just throw that out there. With that said, I am here to serve you, and you know, the comment or the motion does, the second part of the motion does indicate that, you know, or any position that has direct access to council, that I would need a little bit more information on, I guess, because in my opinion, and it's only my opinion, the only position that technically has direct access to council is the Chief Administrative Officer. If you look at the organization chart, my position is the only one that essentially reports directly to council. With that said, in order to make sure that the operation runs efficiently, obviously I'm in favor of having my senior management staff speak to members of council because we need to run the operation. So I'll leave it at that for now, Mr. Mayor. I do have a package with the current hiring and termination practices as I know them, but again, they're subject to change. I'm willing to provide this information to all members of council to review, and I'll take direction as council wishes.
Just as an addition to what you described, go through, please, what the normal process is as far as getting applications, screening those down, narrowing them down to a short list, and then the interview committee interviews the short list, what the questions that happen and how they're handled, and then the scrum afterwards, and then further shortlisting and presenting a scenario for delivery, and then further analysis. Maybe you just give a summary of that process.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think you just summarized it. Thank you. Essentially, yes. So whenever there is a position that's available, we go out, we post for the position. However, before we post for the position, we always take a look at, the position and try to understand, do we want to actually go out and rehire for that position, or do we potentially want to make some changes that might benefit the township? So there's always an opportunity when someone leaves to potentially modify and/or adjust the organization, and we try to take a look at that. And to be honest with you, we did look at that for one of the positions, and we decided that we didn't want to walk that path. We thought that for now, we would just, we would go out and continue the recruitment process. So to your point, Mr. Mayor, we go out, we post the position. It's typically posted depending on the type of position. Finance, it's posted on our website, it's posted in the Springwater Link, but it's also posted on financial associations and/or other CPA organizations that are financial related. That's an example. Fire chief and the director of rec would be similar. We'd post them in associations that make sense to those positions. Essentially, we leave it open for a couple weeks. Candidates are able to apply. We essentially, those applications come in. We start to screen them based on the qualifications of the position. So we do look at what we've asked in the job posting versus what's in their resume, and then we start the shortlist. And we usually typically try to come up with 5 to 6 individuals. Sometimes it's more, sometimes it's less, depending on the talent pool. Then we get together, the manager of human resources and myself, we get together and we take a look at, and we seek other questions from other municipalities who may have had a recent hire of the same position. We take a look at the questions and we develop a question sheet, if you will. We reach out to members of council, not all members of council, I'll be clear about that. We haven't in the past reached out to all members of council, and that may be part of this challenge or request. So those members of council indicate whether they are able to participate, and then essentially we book the interviews. We conduct the interviews, and usually with senior management positions, we have an interview whereby there are a number of formal questions, and then there can be some informal questions, whether it be by the applicant and/or the interview panel. And then from there, we usually, as the hiring team, would have a discussion about all of the candidates once we've interviewed them all. Those individuals or that hiring team would then consider whether we narrow it down to possibly 2 or 3. And in the instances for most of the senior positions that we've just hired, we've had second interviews where they've had to come in and do a presentation to the hiring team. And so after the presentation, the hiring team gets together. We have a conversation about who we think would be the best fit, who is the best qualified. We have essentially a consensus meeting, although the final decision has, for the most part, come down to the CAO. And in most cases, it has aligned with the hiring committee. From there, we essentially reach out and we check references of that individual, make sure everything checks out, and then we start the negotiation process with them. And I'll leave it at that.
So if we were to involve more people in that process, keep in mind that the process takes about 10 hours, and it happens during the day. So, and it could happen over 2 or 3 days. And it would involve, if we had all of council plus others from HR, it involved 10 people around a table like this, interviewing individual candidates. So I'm not sure whether that's the most conducive environment for interviewing. Open it up. Councillor Moore? First of all, CEO Schmidt, and then I'll go to Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, members of council. So just one thing further. So I have reached out to other CAOs just to kind of see where their municipalities are with this, just to get a sense, is there kind of a best practice, if you will. I'll be honest with you, it is all over the map. There's no set way that this is happening. Some municipalities are councils involved from the very beginning to the very end. There's other councils that are involved in just the interview process. There's other councils that are just involved in the final selection process. There's some that are not involved at all. So again, there's no magic bullet here, I guess, if you want to call it that. But again, I am open to whatever council wishes. If you want to be involved, then by all means. I apologize if I offended anybody, because that wasn't my intent. I was going based on what I knew, and I guess maybe I don't know much, but I do apologize because I didn't mean to offend anybody.
Let me just get to the others, I'll get back to you. Councillor Moore?
Thank you, Mayor Allen. So I've just recently found out that prior to this council, these interviews did take place with more members of council. So I didn't ask any questions about the hires because I didn't know any different. I just thought that was the way it happened. Looking back now, I would have liked to have been part of the final selection process, only because I've been asked questions. So, and I don't know any answers. So they might say, well, what do you know about the new fire chief? Well, I really don't know. Or what do you know about the new director, especially the director of parks, because our old director was here for so long, so many people knew him. So I've been asked those questions and I had no answers. So I did feel out of the loop. I didn't like that. And I do feel that somebody being interviewed at a director level expects a panel type interview. I don't think those folks would expect any less. So I'm not feeling that there would be any intimidation factors if there was several of us there. So I think that if the shout went out to all of us and said who would like to be there at the final three, and if we wanted to be present or if we had burning questions, that we had that opportunity, I'd really appreciate that. Thank you.
Councillor Hanna?
Thank you, Mayor. I did have dialogue with the CEO, Schmidt, with regard to the recent hires. Since this council's been sworn in, under your leadership, we've hired 3 director positions. And again, as Councilor Moore's pointed out, I don't know anything about any of them. Was not included in part of the process. And I do believe that the best process we've ever had when it came to hiring was when we hired the clerk and we hired the former CAO. All of council was involved in the final process. We received a presentation from the applicants. We all had drafted previous questions, and it went very well. And I think we all took ownership in the decision because we knew the people we were hiring versus the people we didn't hire. I don't know whether the rehires, and I got no complaints with the rehires because I don't know anything about them, those recent hires. I can say it was not a laborious thing. We did it over 2 days when it was the clerk's position. I think they're the same with the CAO, but it was efficient, it worked well. As I say, we took ownership. We had insight into the person that was hired. Everybody on this council brings something different to the table, and I think we all can contribute. And we all, as board of directors, should be part of that decision-making process. And to be honest with you, I'm going to have difficulty in the future supporting any new hires at a director level where all of council's not involved. Having said all that, from what I can tell, we've hired good people, but it would have been nice to be part of the process.
Okay. Councillor Ritchie, did you have a follow-on?
Mayor Allen, if you don't mind, I'll let Councillor Cabral and then I'll speak.
Councillor Cabral?
Thank you very much, Mayor Allen. I'm just going to tell it the way it is. I didn't have the luxury of what had happened prior to, and I was actually quite happy that I got an invitation to come and sit on that. But at the same time, I also kind of, in my mind, kind of looked at the mechanics of it all, and I realized why I might have been asked or invited to come and sit on that panel. What I did not know is whether or not any other members of council had been given the same opportunity. We all have different strengths. We all have different backgrounds. Some of us might have sat on panels to hire people, hundreds of times. Maybe some of us have sat on panels where we looked at people to bring onto an organization, much the same process, and we're able to engage ourselves in that way. So I kind of like the process. I like being part of it, but I just want to stress the point that I was really kind of unaware as to the fact that other members had not been given the same opportunity. I was unaware, actually, that Councillor Mao Chapman was in on the Parks Rec. I'm glad that you were, because it did give that other perspective. And I think that's the key here is you took it upon yourselves when you hired the fire chief to bring in an outside person with some expertise, which makes so much sense. But at the same time, it's this council, as Councillor Hanna has clearly stated, more or less the board of directors. And if these people are coming on board, I'm not saying that you have to. I'm just saying it would be nice if the offer was extended, and if you thought that it was a relevant thing that you might like to be part of on a particular position, that you might be given the opportunity, and then decline it if you don't want to do it. But I also agree that when it comes down to the final group or final number of people, that everybody on council should have an opportunity to be part of that particular process when it comes down to the final 3 or 4 or whatever. And once again, it would be based on who wants to come to that. If only 3 councillors come to it, then that's all that shows up. But you might find that you'll get 7 of us here, along with the senior staff that are involved in the process. So I do apologize because I was part of the process, but I didn't know what happened prior to. So for me, it just seemed normal. And I kind of got the sense that because I was involved with the Audit and Finance Committee, kind of made sense for the treasurer's position. So from my standpoint, I can certainly see that maybe, I hate to say it, but people might feel excluded by not being invited. And I think that's the key here. And we all bring different qualities, different experience, different backgrounds, and certainly different perceptions. And that's what makes the hiring process so dynamic. So I would suggest that, yes, it does need to be revisited.
CEO Schmidt?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to make one comment and just kind of clarify things. So, you know, there was a comment made that previously things were different. I do want to clarify that, yes, the clerk, Clerk Ainsworth, was, all members of council were included, and possibly the former CAO, I'm not sure. However, when I was hired, not all members of council were included. When our Director of Public Works was hired, not all members of council were included. When our former fire chief was hired, not all members of council were included. So I do want to make sure that all members of council are aware that, you know, not all members were included in the past as well. So I do want to make sure that that's clear.
Deputy Mayor Coughlin.
Thank you, and thank you for saying what I was about to say. I've been involved as a library board member when we hired our library board CAO, or the library CAO. I don't feel that we're doing anything inconsistent from my term, but I've only been here for 5 years, unlike other members of council. But I think what we're hearing is that we would like to establish a hiring policy adopted by Springwater Township. So if we could just change the resolution to work with HR and work with the CAO to develop a hiring policy for Springwater Township, I think maybe this discussion may not happen, could provide this for us.
I'm going to get to Councillor Ritchie first, please.
Mayor Allen, moving forward there, I agree, kind of getting a consensus, and I know myself, I know there's a lot of work that goes into it. I appreciate that. I respect the work that you do. But I think if we got down to the short straws, where we were part of the process, where we did be able to ask, there's some great people here on council that has lots of expertise in this matter that could, I think it's all part of that as far as that goes. So going forward, yeah, and you know what, as far as, you know, there's an emergency meeting, we got to gather. At least we had a chance to be part of the process and to be able to put a name to the, having spoken to council members around the table, there's lots of expertise here. I'd like to put that to use. And no offense to the CAO Schmidt. I think you're doing a great job. And you know what? It's either now or never. But we may as well implement it now. But moving forward, if there's something to come back, we can massage it and agree on it and move forward. So I'll leave it at that.
Councillor Cabral.
Thank you, Mayor Allen. Just to add to that, the sense I'm getting from it isn't that the process was necessarily flawed. I think there was miscommunication more than anything else. But at the same time, I find it very, very interesting that the members on council do want to be active in that process. So if anything, I think that actually bodes well for council as a whole, that the members who sit here want to be part of that process so that they can help the organization grow.
Thank you. Okay, just pause for a moment here. right, Terry's okay with this? So the motion reads, be it resolved that council direct chief, no, so that part should be. Yeah. Be it resolved that this council direct staff to draft a revised hiring policy which includes provision for council's involvement in the hiring process of senior management. All those in favor? Carried. Any other notices of motion? Councillor Ritchie.
Thank you, Mayor Allen. Be it resolved that the Director of Public Works come back to council on our next council meeting, March 18th, with recommendations towards the next storm and further a list of office staff who have the proper license to drive a snowplow truck so we are better prepared for the next time we have a storm. So I'm looking for a report. Who's here in the office? Who's available? If we have a spare truck, do we need another spare truck? Can we put it in the Elmvale yard? What procedures do we have in place? This is like an emergency session. We got a town crippled,
Okay,
can't go nowhere.
So, do you have a
Well-
seconder for that motion? Oh, so the seconder is for next meeting, so you've got it written out there?
Yes, I do.
Okay, present that to clerk. Any others notices of motion? Okay, items for future consideration. Item 12, any items for future consideration? Okay, next we need a mover and seconder to get the bylaws on the table. Deputy Mayor Coughlin and Councillor Moore. Clerk Ainsworth.
Thank you. I just wanted to note that in the off-road vehicle bylaw, there was a clerical error on page 6 within the authorization, so a section number was incorrectly stated, which will be corrected in the final version of the bylaw.
Okay, Deputy Mayor Coughlin.
Thank you, Marilyn, and through you, I guess, to Clerk Ainsworth or anyone. The communication to our residents on this piece, I know that we will probably be receiving some phone calls asking us, when can I get on the road? Is it legal now? When does it all start? So, and just a little bit on our communication platform for this initiative.
Is that Clerk Ainsworth?
Thank you. So the bylaw will be in effect as of its passage, and communications will start right away to get the information on the website, as well as through bylaw enforcement for educational materials.
Follow on?
Yes, thank you. So just so we're clear, our residents are able to, as soon as we pass this, they're able to ride on the roads between now and 11 p.m. and then again all day tomorrow.
That is correct. That is correct.
Yep. Okay, bylaws listed herein be signed and sealed by the mayor and clerk. 220-008, council remuneration. 22013, off-road vehicles bylaw. 22015, assume roadway. Snow Valley Phase 5 and 5003-309, remove holding symbol 1194233 Ontario Limited regarding the Eek Pit. All those in favor? Carried. Adopt the proceedings, mover and seconder. Councillor Moore, Councillor Chapman. That bylaw 2020-17 to confirm and adopt proceedings of council at the regular meeting held on March 4, 2020, listed herein be signed and sealed by the mayor and clerk. All those in favor? An adjournment bylaw. Councillor Cabral, Deputy Mayor Coughlin. Regular meeting of Township of Springwater does adjourn at 8:54 p.m. To meet again in a regular meeting, March 18, 2020, 6:30 p.m., Council Chambers, Admin Center, Minising. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you for attending, and thank you for tuning in.